I am speaking. If you caught last night's vice presidential debate, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Even if you missed it, you see that it's trending all over social media. It was specifically when Kamala Harris, vice presidential candidate Kamala Harris, let Vice President Pence know she wasn't finished speaking. And women all over America and probably the world cheered loudly and proudly all over the internet and in their homes and probably out in the streets as well. I'm Nile Harris. I'm a life strategist, a coach, a consultant, and speaker. And I want to come on here with this coachable moment for today because let's face it, it's a coachable moment for both sides of the interruption equation because both men and women interrupt. But I want to talk about the context, the content, and the consequence of interruption, which is what women were reacting to last night. And so specifically, women in general get interrupted a lot, and Black women, more specifically, how we are perceived when we take up space. And what I coach women is to take up their space, and I coach men to, you can have your space, just make more of it. And so let's first talk about the context of interruption. Interrupting is rude regardless, right? This is why we shouldn't interrupt. But the primary reason you shouldn't interrupt is because if your mouth is open, your ears are closed. And that makes it really difficult for people to communicate from the overlap instead of the gap if they just keep talking past one another. So let's talk about context for a minute. Now, I'm a coach and I do executive coaching, and this will come up a lot, the interruption thing. And I will interrupt my clients for three reasons. One, there's a pattern that I want them to observe. Two, they're not landing the plane. They're circling the airport, but they're not quite landing the plane. And three, I need clarification on something that they said so that I understand their story better. I don't want them to get too far down the road if I'm not clear on what exactly it is that they're talking about. So those are the times, those are the contexts of interruption. Now, women also interrupt other women. In my experience, at least in the professional setting, where I've seen this happen is some women communicate sort of overlapping because it's the way that they bond. That's kind of like the girlfriend thing. And that's how they like to bond and show friendship and respect. The issue is not every woman wants to be communicated with that way. I, for example, am a listener and I'm a natural listener. I actually enjoy listening. The issue is when I go to speak, I'm really listened to. So when I'm communicating with somebody who's sort of a jumper-inner, if you will, I don't do well in that situation because I don't feel heard. Now, this other context is what we saw last night in the vice presidential debate, which is the context of, I want to say what I want to say. I have a counterpoint to make. You said something that I don't agree with, or I think I'm not going to agree with it because you never actually finished your sentence, but I want to speak. And that is the context of the interruption. That leads us to the content of the interruption. Now, as I was saying before with the executive coaching, the content of my interruption is, hey, I wanted to pause you because I wanted to better understand this point, or this wasn't clear. I wanted to pause you because I didn't necessarily, I want you to observe this behavior. And I want to know what you think about it. An exception to interrupting a client is when I feel that they're having an internal dialogue out loud. And if I interrupt that process, it will throw them off and they definitely won't land the plane then. It's a fine line. In this context of what we saw last night is what happens like all over boardrooms, all over America, is men speaking over women because they think they know more, or maybe not even because they think they know more. They have a point and they want to say the point. Now, I hear you, men. Wait for it. You're saying to yourself, probably a lot of you, well, women can get into it. Women can jump in. It's a spirited debate. Let's all have conversation and talk, and we'll all be talking together. It's open. My speaking isn't stopping somebody else from speaking. Women need to just jump in. Here's the problem. It leads us to consequence of interruption. It is not that most women are unwilling or don't want to engage in spirited debate, don't want to get in or wade into the fray. It is the consequence of when we do. So the act of being interrupted is compounded by the consequence of the perception of us once we do. And I've experienced this, right? Especially as a Black woman. I'm always aggressive. I had this manager once who, I don't care how I said something, if my voice was too high, if my voice was hoarse one day, I would invariably get a phone call. And one day I was talking about a frustration I had with the product. It wasn't about a person. It wasn't directed at anyone in particular. I'm a problem solver. And I was trying to solve a problem around an inanimate object, a product. And I had tried lots of different things and I wasn't seeing results. And I was merely expressing a little bit of frustration around that. Like, I've tried this, I've tried that. I wasn't throwing tables. It was professional. I wasn't throwing wine bottles or anything else, right? It was just frustration. 3 hours, within 3 hours, my manager is calling me and telling me to stop showing emotion at work. What he was calling emotion barely registered as emotion, but apparently it was a conversation between the rest of the people on the phone call, that there was something wrong with me, right? This is the consequence. And these are the things that follow women out of the experience and that don't follow men out of the experience. So what do I mean by that? Jack and Jill are having a conversation. Jack interrupts Jill. And by the 15th time, Jill's had enough. And she's like, hey, I'm speaking, sir. When they leave the room, all the men, I've rarely seen a man being branded as being, that time of the month or the B word or anything like that, right? It's always the woman. Well, maybe she's just having difficulty. She's challenging. This is the frustration. This is what that collective sigh and cheer that women had last night. Because when a woman leaves the room, it follows her throughout her career and will show up in her annual review. It will show up when she tries to network around the company. It doesn't show up for men. Here's the thing. In that same company where I'm being called out for expressing frustration, people also then received the micro message that they could speak to me any kind of way, both men and women. I had people call my ideas stupid. I had leaders 2 levels up using the F-bomb for no particular reason in meetings, getting loud. I had, peers and coworkers calling me up, screaming the B word into the phone. But if I said anything, I was problematic. This follows us. So this is what you feel, the consequence of interruption. So what do we do? This is the coachable moment. Men, I'm talking to you first. Make space for other opinions, and not just other women. Like, don't interrupt each other, frankly, but make space for other opinions. If you see that somebody else is talking, man or woman, whatever, don't interrupt. Listen with your ears, not with your mouth. Second, call it out. If you see Jack and Jill are engaged in a conversation and Jack keeps interrupting Jill, you tell Jack to go down the hill and wait for Jill to finish. Okay? And outside of the room, if Jack comes up to you or you hear Jack come in conversation with someone else saying that Jill was unreasonable, or maybe it was just that time of the month, you tell Jack, hey, you know what, Jack? I thought you were incredibly rude. You came off as a bully in there, and maybe next time you might want to make some space for Jill, or at least wait for her to finish her sentence. Okay? Women, here's what I would love to see us do more. We have the right to take up space. You see? We have the right to take up our space, and I want to see us taking up more of our space in productive ways. Now, the first thing is speaking up. Now, don't be like last night's moderator and keep saying, thank you, Mr. Vice President. Change it up. Hey, Jack, I would love to finish my point. Oh, Jack, great. I wasn't quite finished. Change it up. Second, to sort of develop an evaluation system, because sometimes people who don't have a pattern of interrupting, we don't want to just jump on them and be like, you're an interrupter. Like, let's watch and see what the pattern is for that person. The first time somebody interrupts me, I stop. I don't acknowledge the point. And when they're done, I'll say something like, oh, okay, I'd love to finish my point as I was saying, and I'll pick up on the exact last word that I left off on. And then I will ask for their counterpoint. And then we'll have a discussion about what they think. The second time, I will stop them. Oh, wait, nope, I wasn't done. I wasn't done. I'd love to finish my thought. Thank you, Mr. Vice President. And then the third thing, when the third interruption happens, I keep talking. And is that productive? Yes or no, it's debatable, but it does send a message that I'm not going to be interrupted. And we need to find a way to speak from the overlap instead of the gap. And that might mean we have to have a separate conversation out of the room. The third thing, once you start doing the first and second thing, we have to get comfortable with a couple of things. We first have to get comfortable with the fact that we're going to have to continue as women to have these mental gymnastics. If you look back at the tape or you think about all the times that Vice President candidate Kamala Harris had to like smile, she had to like, like all the gymnastics she was doing with her body, right? There's still some degree that we're going to have to do as we shift to the new normal of taking up space. I had a mentor years ago who gave some great advice and said, put a mirror at your desk. And so she would have the mirror, this particular mirror, it says smile. And she would have the mirror and she would look in the mirror and smile as she's on the phone. And because she felt like if I'm smiling, that comes through the phone, people will hear the smile in your voice. Plus it also makes you feel better. You can't necessarily be angry or frustrated or sound angry and frustrated if your mouth isn't a smile. And so we're going to have to get comfortable with that. Another thing that we're going to have to get comfortable with is that, yes, ladies, it is going to impact our career when we speak up. Have I been called aggressive? Yep. Has it appeared in my annual review that I'm difficult or challenging? Sure. Yes. But when I wasn't called aggressive? When I was hitting my number. I wasn't called aggressive when I was exceeding my number. I wasn't called aggressive when I hit all of my targets or whatever it is I was asked to do. Then I wasn't aggressive. But we just have to get comfortable with the fact that in order for change to happen, we have to be out front of it and we have to take up our space and be glad in our space and be happy in our space. So that's it. That is the coachable moment. The context of the interruption is important. The content of the interruption is where you will have, where you should start focusing on communicating from the overlap instead of the gap. The consequence of the action, we need to find ways to mitigate that, but that's where the frustration is for men. If you didn't understand that, and women, I'd love to hear more about this. We really just need to start doing more active listening as a society. So if you are still listening to me, thank you. I would love to hear your comments below. Let me know so women, how do you handle interruption? Men, how have you made space for women? And have you been calling out other men? And if we are not already connected, please connect with me. I'm Nile Harris. I work with entrepreneurs and professionals to reignite their warrior spirit and pursue their passion and purpose in life, whatever that may be, whatever path it may take them down. I look forward to our continued conversations. Get after it.